it seems like a lot of times when I start with this really firm idea about what I want to build, during the process of the building process, I find new ways or new ideas of things I can do with the build. And this is definitely one of those things. I changed my mind several times throughout this build, and I'm glad I did. And I'll talk about that more towards the end of the video. And what I'm building is a cabinet for doing exercises, an exercise machine, or home gym rather. Now, I started out wanting to build a rowing machine, and this kind of just morphed into its own little life of all the different things I could do with this. So I'm building this cabinet that's going to be attached to the wall in my garage. I didn't want something big laying out in the middle of the garage. I wanted something small form that could be folded away or put away and not take up a bunch of floor space. Now, I'm building this cabinet without a face frame, so whenever I'm doing a cabinet with no face frame, I always start with the top and the bottom of the cabinet. And in this case, I'm using stretchers on the back instead of a full piece of plywood because I'm trying to preserve the plywood that I have, because I want to do this whole thing out of one sheet of plywood and a panel I bought. I don't want to go beyond that. Keep it as cost effective as possible. So the stretchers are kind of acting like the back of the cabinet and also give me a place to attach, the screws or run screws through to attach it to a wall. Now initially I just glued everything and tacked it all together with 18 gauge brad nails. Now after I have the cabinet components all put together, I will come back and run screws in, and I'll show you that here in a minute. So these little runners in the back here are going to be the start of a railing system that I'm using to kind of capture a dumbwaiter that I can add weights to. Now with all that stuff installed, these are the major components for the cabinet. I came back and marked positions out to pre-drill some holes and then add some 2.5-inch finish screws. So these finish screws are basically just a regular wood screw with a very small head. And the reason I did that is because I'm going to putty all these holes up and then come back and paint this cabinet, and I didn't want to have bigger holes to putty up. And every once in a while I'm out working on a project, even one that my son gets excited about something, he'll come out and give me a hand for a while. So he came out, and between the two of us we managed to put all the fasteners in actually really pretty quick. And when that was done, he helped me putty the cabinet and get it sanded and ready for paint. So here's this box that I built, and I built that off camera. It's going to go in the back of the cabinet, and then it's going to run along those rails I installed earlier. And these rails right here that I'm cutting now are going to capture that in place. If you look at the box, you can see there's a little cantilevered piece of plywood off to the sides on both the right and left side. So these second runners are going to capture that box in place and allow the box to move up and down the cabinet, but not anywhere else. So when I'm installing that, I just want to make sure that there's plenty of room for it to move freely. This doesn't have to be real precise. So I basically just lifted I beat the runner down against a piece of plywood, and then I kind of lifted it up about, 10/1000ths of an inch. So with all that done, I decided it was time to give it the paint. Now I got some kind of a yellowish, like burnt paint color from one of the mistake places at Home Depot. And then I didn't really care for the color, so I came back and added a little bit of a brown glaze to it just to kind of give it that, that textured feel. So with the cabinet done, I needed to start working on the doors. And originally I bought this panel, and I was thinking I was going to have the door was going to have like these 3 folds, so I could like fold it 3 ways, and it would be like this really tight, compact little folded door off to the side. I don't know why I did that. Honestly, it was one of those things like, oh, this would be cool. And then after thinking about it, I just, it was pretty much senseless. But I did it anyway. And whenever you're installing piano hinges like I'm doing here, the fastest way to do this, the most accurate way to do it, is to use some speed tape on the back of it and stick it in place. And then use a center gauge to center out all the holes and then run the screws in. It keeps it really centered. So the last 2 things to do here were to just add the pulleys in the cabinet. So there was 2 pulleys up on top and 1 at the bottom at the front of the cabinet. And with the pulleys installed, I'm adding the cable that's going to attach to the dumbwaiter box, or the box that I'm going to put weight in. Now I use these pulleys that are about they're like $4 at one of the big box stores, and they were rated for 500 pounds. They work. I think probably what I'll end up doing is coming back and replacing them with pulleys that have bearings in them, because they're noisy. And you'll see towards the end here when I show you this thing in motion and how it's working. It's just noisy as heck. Oh, and there's a tip I wanted to tell you. If you're ever cutting cable, and even this is plastic cutting cable, a Dremel tool with a cutoff wheel is great for cutting cable, and if you don't have a cable cutter. So there you can see the doors, how I had them, where they were all folding up, and I really didn't care for it. So I put some pieces of plywood on the back and just tightened them down. And again, installed the piano hinge on the side to hold the door on. And then what I'll probably do is end up replacing that door with a full piece, with a full panel. But I didn't have the material in the shop to do it at the time, so I just left it, which is fine. I mean, it's a utilitarian cabinet. It doesn't have to be sexy. And then I got my neighbor Dave to come over and help me hold it in place while I attached it to the wall in the shop. Now really the only thing left to do with the cabinet itself was to install the top piece. And I left that off because I wanted to have access to those stretchers in the back to screw this against the wall. So to do that, I just put a rack of 18 gauge brad nails on top the door, and I used my brad nailer to tack the door on. So all in all, I'm pretty happy with this build. There are a few things like the pulleys that I'm a little bit concerned about, and you'll hear those here in a second when I start using it. But the nice thing about this is I can pretty much store my weights and anything else I want to around this cabinet or in this cabinet, so it's not taking up valuable floor space. Now, as you can see, they're pretty noisy. I think I'm going to try some graphite spray first, and if I have my headphones on with the music blaring, I'm probably not going to hear them all that well, but I think it's just that subconscious thing of just knowing that they're squeaking and grinding that I will want to fix. So I'm really happy with this build. I like the way this is working out, and I can use this particular part of this build for many different exercises. Now, I've got some other plans for it, and I'll be adding the rowing machine fold-out part to it in a later video, but for now I can store everything I need to in there that I'm going to use for working out.